We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse's Phil Brasher, and we're making history here. Week in Review history this week. The first time we've ever had two members of Congress join us for this program. And joining us this week is the bipartisan force behind the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. We have Washington Republican Dan Newhouse and California Democrat Zoe Lofgren, and we appreciate you both of you taking a little bit of time to join us, and want to dive right in here and talk about the vote that we saw here on Thursday on this Farm Workforce Modernization Act. 247 to 174 vote, 30 Republicans voting with congressional Democrats on the subject. I'll go alphabetically, so Congresswoman Lofgren, I'll start with you, but I'd like to hear from both of you on this. This vote that we saw and the level of support that we've seen, not only now, but also in the vote in 2019. What do you think that tells us just about the temperature for immigration reform and ag workforce reform on Capitol Hill at the moment?
Well, this is a good, strong vote that we had tonight, and I'm pleased with it. I think it reflects really not just the bill that has been produced, but the process that produced it. We worked together, Dan and I and other members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, for close to a year. And it wasn't just us, a bunch of politicians sitting in a room. It was stakeholders in the issue. We had the United Farm Workers Union and the Western growers, who don't always agree, sitting down and sorting through issues. How do we resolve the problem, which is a workforce that is in the country, that is majority undocumented. A majority have been here more than 10 years, and yet their fate is uncertain, and therefore it's uncertain for their employers. And then how do you streamline and improve the temporary worker program, the H-2A program, that nobody's happy with right now? Employers think it falls short. The union thinks it falls short. So how do you make that better for everybody? And we ended up with a bill that basically has three sections. The first one provides for a process to allow the existing workforce to get a certified agricultural worker status. And then later, if they so choose and stay in ag, they can apply to pay a fine and apply to become a legal permanent resident. Section 2 streamlines and fixes most of what's wrong with the H-2A program by streamlining it, but also extending it so that it can be used by the dairy industry as a year-round program. And then 3 is, if we have a workable program, which we think this bill would ultimately provide, it should be enforced. We should expect people to use that program. And so after the bill is entirely law implemented, we would use the E-Verify system, so in the ag sector. So you got to prove that you are lawfully here in order to have a job in the ag sector once this is in place. If you have a system, what we want is we want legal immigration. We want an orderly system where people have the capacity to comply with the system that we've structured that meets the needs of the American economy, that also recognizes the needs of the workforce and the dignity that they deserve as well. So I'm proud of what we did, and I think now on to the Senate. I was pleased that we had a joint statement this evening from Senators Bennett and Crapo celebrating the passage of this bill and indicating they plan to proceed with the bill in the Senate. So let's get this into law.
Yeah, Yeah. Can I add just a little bit to that?
Please do. Please do.
That was a great response. So, and just a couple of short thoughts. I also was pleased with the vote count. It was very similar to what it was 2 years ago. And it's the same bill, exactly the same bill. And there's a few different faces in Congress now. People use their vote, utilize their vote in different ways. And I think some people were saying with a no vote that they thought that it was maybe close, but not quite what they wanted it to be. And so it's a signal to the Senate that changes have to be made. And I respect that. I've done that myself on certain occasions. And I think there's probably, we don't work in a void here or a vacuum. I have to say, I believe that some of the current events going on today, particularly at our southern border, likely have had an impact on some people level of support. Anytime you have legislation that uses the word immigration, things like what's happening on our border make that a very difficult choice to make. This is not an amnesty bill. This is something that, like Zoe said, it provides our current workforce an opportunity to get right with the law. And it does that with high expectations. We're not giving anybody anything. We're making them prove their work history, and also we're committing to continuing to work in the agricultural industry. And so, in my way of thinking, this is not anywhere close to amnesty. But like I said, sometimes people see things differently, obviously. But this is truly not rocket science. Even though it's been very difficult, I think they probably have developed rockets faster than when we've developed this bill. It really is pretty simple. We want people, and we need people from outside the country to be able to come work on our farms, work on our ranches legally. And then we want them to be able to go home, which most of them would like to see their families in their home countries. And then guess what? When the work begins again, at least in my neck of the woods, things slow really way down in the wintertime. They can, after the winter's over, they can return again legally. And so I think that that's what we're the goal of this legislation is, and I think it takes a great step forward for our agricultural industry. And like Zoe, I'm very happy with the results, and I'm really anxious and looking forward to continuing the work that we have with our colleagues in the Senate, so that we can finally get this done and provide American agriculture with what they need, some answers to one of the most critical problems they face, and that's a lack of a qualified legal workforce.
Congresswoman, I want to pick up there. You in the House obviously passed not just this bill, but a second bill that would provide legal status to dreamers. And there are obviously still a lot of folks that you don't deal with in either of these bills that are in the country. A lot of, if you'd explain to some of our viewers and folks in agriculture, there's been a lot of pent-up frustration about their inability to get the workers they say they need. And they want to know, why can't you just pass? Why can't you just deal with the ag labor issue? Why does this have to be part of a much bigger conversation?
Well, I think actually, these are two separate bills. One, I've met probably thousands of these kids who end up, and here's a typical situation. Kid gets brought here when they're a child. I remember a boy I met he was valedictorian, and he was the quarterback in high school. And he went down to get his driver's license. Only then he found out he wasn't born in the United States. And it was news to him, and he didn't speak the language of the country he was born in, and there was nothing for him to do. I mean, that's crazy. So we need to figure out a way for these kids who are basically Americans, except for their paperwork, to become full Americans. And that was the first bill that we took up today. Then we got the Farm Worker Modernization Bill, which we've been discussing. It's a good, solid bill, and it very directly addresses the need for farm labor across the United States, including in industries that had previously been excluded. You're right, there are other issues that we did not deal with today, and I hope that we will be able to deal with. There was a rule adopted by the House that if a bill passed in the last Congress, and if you brought it to the floor before April 1st, you didn't have to go through the burdensome committee process again. Basically, you could just do a repeat on what you did in the last Congress. So both of these bills passed in the last Congress, and so we brought them both forward today. I have a bill that I hope to bring forward, a startup visa bill. You know, I'm from Silicon Valley. You know, the economy is fueled by people who do startups and build companies. And a lot of those entrepreneurs are people who got their PhD, you know, at Stanford, but they were born someplace else. And there's no way we make them go home and start a company someplace else. I don't think that serves the United States. So, you know, I've got a bill about that. I have, you know, a bill to improve the immigration court system and several other things. Those will have to go in the regular order through the Judiciary Committee. There's also a bill that President Biden has suggested, authored by Linda Sanchez from California, that doesn't do everything, but does a lot that, you know, we will also be marking up, and we'll see if there's support for it. Even if that bill passes, it does have a legalization provision for farm workers, but it doesn't reform the H-2A program the way that we have done here. So we would have to do this even if that bill were to become law.
So Philip, if I could just add one thought there.
Sure.
Yeah, there's nothing about the subject of immigration that doesn't become complex very, very quickly. And as you've been following Congress a long time, before I got here, there was an effort to pass a more comprehensive immigration bill. And so I wasn't involved with it personally. I think Zoe may have been. But from what I understand, and this is true in other subject areas too, anytime you do something in a comprehensive way, it becomes just exponentially more difficult. And so this strategy has been to let's focus on more on individual kinds of parts of that comprehensive effort. And so this is a great example today, you know, focusing on the ag labor issue. And Zoe's right, there's many other things that we could and at some point will talk about, but just to be as focused as possible on a smaller part of the pie, it seems to be a better strategy moving forward. And I hope today is proof of that, that we were successful for the second time getting it passed off the House floor, and now we'll see what the Senate can do.
Mm-hmm. Congressman, speaking about the Senate, Republicans over there have been, including Lindsey Graham, who was a member of the Gang of Eight, have been saying that with the border situation at the border, which you alluded to earlier, it's just not the time to move an immigration bill. You've got to stop the flow of illegal immigration first. How do you get past that at this time in the Senate?
I heard him say that. I was standing 3 feet, I should say 6 feet, but it was maybe 4 feet away from him when he said that. And so that's the reality, I guess, probably for a lot of people in the Senate. But and so I think that just underscores the need to address the situation at the border, not just so we can pass our bill. For a lot of other reasons, it has to be addressed as quickly as possible. So if that's incentive to get that done, so be it, and so much the better. And I don't think the situation down there can or certainly should not go on as it is for a long period of time. I don't think it doesn't serve anybody's interest for that to happen. So I'm confident, hopeful anyway, that that solution can be found soon, and then we can get back to some of the things that are truly critical issues in their own right. Like I mentioned, one of the biggest problems, if you ask any farmer in the country, most every farmer, their top three issues of biggest importance, labor is going to be in there with most people.
If I can, just on the point, we heard a lot about the border today, and for, I'll just say, we've got children who were excluded earlier, and they shouldn't have been excluded. The Trafficking Victim Protection Act has a very precise protocol about how children who may have been trafficking victims are to be treated, and that was ignored, and now these children are coming in, there's insufficient capacity to properly care for those children. That will be remedied. But I think the main thing we need to look at is where are all these people coming from? They're turning the families and the single adults away, but they're primarily coming from 3 countries in Central America: Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And it's pretty obvious that what needs to happen is those countries need to stop being a disaster. I mean, we're not seeing people fleeing from Costa Rica in Central America. We're not seeing people fleeing from Belize. It's those 3 countries because there's violence, there's corruption, and people are afraid for their lives. And so, President Biden has announced a plan to try and force the governments of those countries to get a grip, to fight the corruption, to fight the violence. And it shouldn't just be America that's doing that. Other countries in the Western Hemisphere should join with us because it's in no one's interest that people should have to flee for their lives. I want people, like my grandfather was an immigrant, and he came because he wanted a better life for himself. We want people who want to come to become Americans, not who feel that they have to flee for their lives. That's not a good situation. And I think ultimately that will get under control, and we will have a much more orderly situation at the southern border when it is.
You both have alluded to, in a couple of, at various points in some of your responses, have alluded to, well, now we need to work with our friends over in the Senate. And I imagine there's conversations that will be had either in the near or midterm or maybe even long-term future with the other side of Capitol Hill on that subject. I'm wondering, as we wrap up this conversation, can you take us in those meeting rooms? What, if you pretend that you're talking to 2 United States senators instead of 2 reporters right now, what is the sales pitch for this bill and why it's important for that chamber to act? Obviously, we know that this was attempted in 2019 and did not end up on the president's desk. What's your sales pitch to make that happen this time around?
Well, I'll start first, Zoe, while you're thinking about this. Honestly, Spencer, I don't know that it's necessary for us to give a sales pitch. We've already been working very closely with many of our Senate counterparts, not only this session, but last Congress as well. And there truly is a critical mass of members of the Senate who see the critical nature of this issue, the urgency of this. And it's not just coming from us, it's coming from producers in their respective states. And so I think that's what precipitated the note of congratulations from Bennett and Crapo, that they're anxious to see this come over. They want to get working on it. They know that this is a big problem for our country and for our producers. And so that's been, maybe 2 years ago there was more of a hey, come on, we got to do this kind of discussion. I don't see that as much, at least not with the core group of people that we've been working with over the last several months to a year. Just one more thought about the border itself. I know a lot of my colleagues on my side of the aisle are very interested in border security. And I think this legislation truly helps that. And just real quickly, I'll tell you why. Because of the provisions of what we have in here, it really does go a long ways towards removing the incentive on the part of many people to come to this country. Because if you don't have a visa, if you're not part of the H-2A program, if if you're not a certified agricultural worker, and when we phase in the electronic verification, guess what? You're not going to be able to find a job. So if you can't find employment, that, like I said, that will remove a lot of incentive to cross illegally.
The other thing, however, is it also gives a way for people who are not necessarily the people who are fleeing for their lives, but the economic refugees to get money legally. They can apply for an H-2A visa and they can come over and make some money and save the money of paying for the smuggler and take those wages home and come back for the next season. So it replaces disorder with an orderly legal system. And I think I very much agree with you, Dan. Over 300 organizations endorsed this bill. Hundreds of agricultural groups from, the milk industry and potatoes and fresh fruit and the wine, I mean, across the board and across the United States. And I think the senators are going to listen to them, frankly, more than they're going to listen to me and Dan. We're going to talk to them. We'll work through the details. But this is something America needs. And I feel good that we've advanced things in the best interest of the United States today. And we have reason to feel satisfaction with that.
Well, I think that's going to be a good note to bring this conversation to a conclusion. Obviously, a big day for the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, and we will see what the days to come lead up to in terms of that as we wrap things up there, that conversation that is yet to come with the United States Senate. But I think that's going to do it for this week's edition. So for members of Congress, Dan Newhouse and Zoe Lofgren, and for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.